For my paper article choice, I chose the Zhou and Sokac back-to-back mechanisms that drive actomyosin ring closure during Drosophila embryo cleavage. Contraction of actomyosin rings during cytokinesis is typically attributed to actin filaments sliding towards each other via myosin 2 motor activity, but some can occur without myosin activity. This led the experimenters to believe that there must be two ways to complete this process: a way that is dependent on myosin 2 motor activity and a way that's independent of it. An actomyosin ring forms at the leading edge of each membrane column, and as cellularization progresses, the furrow columns get longer and the rings get smaller as it begins to constrict and close. Figure 1a. B then shows F-actin's normal circularization as it progresses through cellularization. C then shows that as furrow length gets longer, perimeter should decrease as circularity should increase. D then shows that as time proceeds, the perimeter should decrease. E shows the constriction rate. During assembly, there shouldn't be any constriction. Instead, it should expand. During phase 1, there should be a small amount of constriction, and during phase 2, there should be a greater amount of constriction. F then shows that furrow length should increase as time proceeds. Figure 2a shows F-actin stained furrows. Figure B shows that as the furrow length increases, F-actin levels will increase from assembly to phase 1 and then begin to decrease at phase 2. C then shows myosin stained furrows. D then shows that as furrow length increases, myosin will also increase from assembly to phase 1 and then begin to decrease at phase 2. E shows septin/peanut stained furrows. F shows that as furrow length increases, peanut levels will increase at assembly and phase 1, but begin to decrease at phase 2. G then shows myosin stained furrows, and it shows that in H, that as furrow length increases, myosin levels will stabilize from assembly to phase 1 and then decrease phase 1 to phase 2. Figure 3a shows a stain for SQH-GFP. As the SQH wild-type control begins to circularize, progressing through the stages of cellularization, the SQH mutant treatment does not. B then shows the perimeter of the actomyosin ring. It decreases in the wild-type, the black line, as normal, progressing through cellularization. The green line, the SQH mutant actomyosin ring, decreases but at a different rate. C then shows the constriction rate for phase 1 versus phase 2. At phase 1, only the wild-type constricts. During phase 2, both the wild-type and the mutant constrict, and at similar rates. D then compares the circularity of the actomyosin ring at 40 minutes for the wild-type versus the mutant. The wild-type has more circularity in comparison to the mutant. E then shows the phase switching times, phase 1 versus phase 2. Both the mutant and the wild-type have similar phase switching times. F then shows the F-actin half-life. The wild-type versus the mutant both are equal. G through L is another experiment where they inhibited myosin 2 in an indirect way by disrupting ROK. Now they're using ROK mutants versus the wild-type. G shows the wild-type circularizes as cellularization proceeds, while the ROK mutant circularization is not as efficient as the wild-type. H then shows that the wild-type has a normal perimeter decline of the ring throughout cellularization, whereas the ROK mutant perimeter increases from assembly to phase 1 and begins to decline throughout phase 2. In I, the constriction rate for the actomyosin ring is being compared for phase 1 and phase 2. In phase 1, on the wild type is constricting. In phase 2, the mutant in the wild type is constricting. The wild type is constricting at a greater rate. In J, the circularity at 40 minutes is being compared for the wild type and the mutant. The wild type has more circularity at 40 minutes than the mutant. K is showing the time it takes to switch from phase 1 to phase 2. Both the wild type and the mutant have equal phase switching times. L is showing that the wild type and the mutant have a relatively similar F-actin half-life. Figure 4a shows the circularity for the Kofler mutant started late in comparison to the normal circularizing of the wild type. B shows the graph that the perimeter of the mutant began to decline around 65 minutes, which is later than the wild type for decline, starting at 45 minutes. C compares the constriction rate for phase 1 versus phase 2. In phase 1, the wild type and the mutant have a very low constriction rate, versus in phase 2, they have a higher constriction rate, where wild type is a little bit higher than the mutant. D compares circularity at 40 minutes for the wild type versus the mutant. They have relatively similar circularity at 40 minutes, but the wild type is a little bit higher than the mutant. E shows the switching times, the phase switching times from phase 1 to phase 2. The mutant actually has a slower phase switching time than the wild type. F then shows the F-actin half-life for the wild type versus the mutant. The mutant has a longer half-life than the wild type. G to L is now experimenting on the F-activin disassembly being completely blocked by phthalidin. The circularizing of the actomyosin rings is relatively equal for both the wild type and the phthalidin treatment. In H, the perimeter for both the mutant and the wild type decreased at a relatively equal pace, with the phthalidin treatment being only about 1 to 2 minutes later. I shows the constriction rate is being compared for both phase 1 and phase 2. Showing that at phase 1, the control and the treatment are relatively equal. For phase 2, the constriction rate is much higher for the control than it is for the phthalidin treatment. At J, the circularity at 40 minutes is being compared for the control and the phthalidin treatment. They are both relatively equal. K is showing that the phase switching time is relatively the same or equal for the control and the phthalidin treatment. Whereas L is showing that the F-activin half-life is higher in the control than it is in the treatment. Figure 5a is comparing the circularizing throughout cellularization. The wild type circularizes normally, whereas the annealing mutant does not circularize. The graph in B shows normal perimeter decline for the wild type starting at phase 2 at around 45 minutes. But for the annealing mutant, circularization starts occurring late at around 65 minutes. C is comparing the constriction rates for the phase 1 and phase 2. In phase 1, only the wild type is constricting. In phase 2, the wild type and the annealing mutant is constricting, but the wild type is constricting at a higher rate. D is showing the circularity at 40 minutes for the wild type and the annealing. The wild type has normal circularity at 40 minutes, whereas the annealing has very low circularity at 40 minutes. D is showing that the phase switching time for the annealing treatment is taking longer than it should in comparison to the wild type. F is showing that the F-activin half-life is the same for wild type and the annealing treatment. G to L experiment was conducted for embryos with 1/2 peanut. G shows circularization of the peanut mutant was much slower. H shows that the perimeter decreased around 65 minutes, which is late in comparison to the wild type. I is comparing the constriction rate for phase 1 and phase 2. In phase 1, both the control and the treatment is constricting at a lower rate. In phase 2, they increase the constriction rate. J is comparing the circularity at 40 minutes. Comparable, however, the mutant is a little less circular. K is showing the phase switching time, which is slower for the mutant. and L is the F active and half-life, which are relatively equal for the mutant and the treatment.